Very special thanks once again to Cars of Somerset for providing the vehicle in this review, on this occasion an M2 Competition of course, and if you want to check out their current stock of vehicles or potentially even commission them to find you a vehicle across the UK, then of course click the link right below this video in the description to check out all of that info. There's always a danger as a reviewer to picking up something like a BMW M2 for a review, because in a similar way to vehicles like the Supra, the Nissan GT-R, the Ferrari F355, vehicles which I've reviewed here on the channel already, they have such a frothy, fervent fan base which really defends and adores these cars. Some definitely more than others, but there is a fairly strong consensus even among the ones I mentioned. You can either swing one of two ways. You can buy in way too much to the hype just to please people, or you can end up going completely the other way and have tons of people hating you and never want to hear what you have to say again. Now, of course, I always like to be as objective as I possibly can in these reviews, and even so, I still have clear favourites and certain vehicles which I've finally driven which have definitely lived up to the hype, and others which maybe didn't so much, or I just didn't personally love as much as other people did. So on this occasion, does the M2, and this particular one is the M2 Competition, which is further refined and even faster than the normal car, does this one live up to its fan base? Is it a car that's worth drooling over, as many young people seem to be these days? Does it actually live up to that hype? Well, the very first thing I'll say about driving this car is it actually makes me want to really drive a 1M, because this is the unofficial successor to that car, but in visual terms, I've always loved the 1M and just haven't had the chance to drive one yet. And based on this one, I have a feeling I may love that car, because even though I didn't absolutely adore this one, and click away goes like 90% of the viewers from the video no doubt, I did definitely see a lot to love here. There are very, very strong points about this car, and to me, it actually doesn't really have any weak points. So that's a pretty good start if you are a fan of it. But if you're unfamiliar with the M2, what's actually going on here? What's the purpose of the car? What does it actually offer? Well, unsurprisingly, it shares a number of components and inspirations and technology with other BMW models, M models in particular, and the essential engine, albeit in a slightly different state of tune, is of course shared with the F80 M3 and the F82 generation M4. So it's among good brethren, and even though this is the baby Beamer, in effect, the lowest grade full-on M car, if you will, it's no slouch, that's for sure. This thing has 405 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. That's 550 newton meters. Those are very good numbers, and both of which are way higher than, for example, a 1M. Which had 335 horsepower when it came out. Now, of course, that's the Competition. This has about 40 or so horsepower more than the standard M2, but given that the Competition is the one I was driving, I'm going to focus in more so on that specific model. Now, in terms of the year that it ran, the M2 overall ran from 2016 to 2020. This one is a 2018, which is when the Competition was introduced, and in terms of the kind of prices you're going to be paying specifically for the Competition, you're looking at about £37,000 to £50,000 here in the UK. And that all depends on whether you get a 2018 or a much newer one, and if the mileage is super low or super high. This car is right in the middle, it's 40 grand, it's only got 12,000 miles, and it's got some very nice modifications. For example, a Stage 2 remap with 540 horsepower, and Bilstein coilovers, as well as a few other things as well, exhaust, etc. So, suffice it to say, it's rather quick. But how quick? How quick is the normal Competition before we talk about how quick this version is? Because again, I've reviewed tuned cars before, and even though it's not necessarily the purest vehicle to compare something to, I think it always gives you a good idea of what a car's potential is. So even in the case of a quote-unquote stock M2 Competition, the 0 to 60 time on, yes, you can actually choose the manual version or the 7-speed dual clutch, which is what I was driving, once again supports my argument, and I made an entire video about it, why I prefer automatics. The automatic is yet again quicker. The manual does 0 to 60 in 4.4, the dual clutch does it in 4.2. 4.2 seconds is very quick for a baby Beamer. And again, that 3-litre straight-six twin-turbo engine does a fantastic job of delivering its performance. The fact that it is turbo-aspirated really helps with that thumpy torque, and even though it is still fairly rev-happy in terms of getting the best out of it, it kind of reminds me of a few Audi RS models in that sense, it is a lot of fun to use. One of the strongest things, if not perhaps the strongest thing, which I like the most about this car, is actually the way its proportions translate into actual driving feel. And what I mean by that is, this car is small, but it's also quite chunky. It's got a very wide track, very blistered arches, much like the 1M had, but at the same time it's not that physically large. The rear seats are more than good enough, the headroom is very good, the overall space is very good, but it's not a huge car by any stretch. However, it's not lightweight. It doesn't have all-wheel drive, but it still weighs well over 1,500 kilos. The weight actually isn't that much different to an M3 or an M4 anyway, which may seem a little bit pointless for a quote-unquote baby M car. There's the thing though, this does not feel anywhere near as heavy as it is, and even though this is the competition package, which weighs, funnily enough, even more than the normal M2 does, it does not feel anywhere close to that. You could easily fool someone into thinking that this was maybe a 1250 kilo car. And to me, if you're going to have a strong upside, that's a pretty good one to have, because cornering, handling manners, steering, the way it handles its weight and its power and its performance, well, they're kind of important things. Especially in the UK, where you pretty much have as much fun on B roads as you do on motorways. We don't have autobahns here, but we do have some great corners and some great back roads, and a car like a 1M or an M3 or an M2 in this case, those are kind of the perfect car, potentially at least, to have fun there. Much like vehicles like a Megane R26 or a Ford Focus RS or a Clio 182 can be as well. These chuckable, corner-friendly, track day monsters, if you will, that you can actually use on the road as well. This car shines in that regard. Straight line performance certainly isn't lacking either, but it's the corners where the real fun is, at least when I was driving the car. Now, in terms of the rest of its spec, the fuel economy, incidentally, is not bad. You can average about 28-29 to the gallon, probably not in this one with 540 horsepower, and given how fast the stock one is, I should imagine this is probably capable of 0 to 60 in maybe 3.5 seconds, 3.6 perhaps, based on the correlation of those numbers to a stock version. So slow it certainly isn't. In terms of bang for buck, well, it does offer a lot, 40 grand for a car that's essentially supercar level in terms of its performance. You compare this car's spec and performance to a supercar of the 2000s, it is genuinely on par with some of them, if nothing else for acceleration alone. It's similar to a Carrera GT or an SLR McLaren on paper. Top-end speed, not so much, unsurprisingly. It's limited to 155, you can get the M package, which raises it to like 175, so it certainly isn't slow. It's a fantastic rival for RS models, AMG models, etc., just as you'd expect. But unlike some of those, in my opinion at least, these BMW M models, such as the 1M or the M2, almost feel more specialized. Like they stand out to me more than some of their equivalent rivals do. Even though on some occasions I might prefer an AMG or an Audi RS, I think that BMW has almost done a better job sometimes of really making cars like this stand out. They're almost like instant cult classics, and from that point of view, I can understand why they have such a strong following and why people love them so much. It doesn't surprise me. The great part about it from a reviewer's point of view, such as myself, is that it actually means I can say honestly, yeah, it kind of does live up to the hype. Now, with that being said, the caveat, which you may have noticed has kind of been coming this whole video, is that even with all of that being said, there are certain cars that just don't fully do it for me. I would even include, for example, something like an Audi RS4. When I reviewed the, I believe it was B8 generation, the one that only came as a wagon some time ago here on the channel, it's a fantastic car. Across the board there is so much to love and respect, but I didn't want one. I didn't want to own one. It didn't grab me. This one doesn't either. This one is a car which I deeply respect. I have a lot of respect across the board for. It looks good, sounds really nice with that bulky straight-six engine. The turbo aspiration is a great choice, gives it fantastic torque, power, acceleration, and even economy. So yeah, I love plenty of things about it, but I would never buy one. Because simply put, for 40, 50 grand, there are just other cars that I prefer. So that really is what it boils down to. It's an obvious statement to make, but it's the kind of car that you should only buy if this is the only car for you. If you're considering an M2, but then considering something else, well, this car almost feels so specific, like I said earlier on. I think you really need to try this one before even considering anything else, because I could see you either falling in love with it immediately and then not even wanting to consider anything else, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, or I could see you driving it and maybe thinking, oh, okay, it's good, but I'm not quite feeling that extra something, that little spark of character. For me, that was the case. I didn't adore this car, I didn't love it, I respected it, I really liked it, and I loved what it was capable of. From a technical standpoint, it's a fantastic little car. Didn't quite have the passion for me. And from that perspective, it really does remind me of some of those Audi RS models. Not all of them, necessarily, but some. Overall, though, that's it for my thoughts. If you are, or were, an owner of an M2, of course, as I always like to say, put your thoughts down below. Do you think I'm stupid for talking this way about it? Do you think it's way better or way worse than I'm saying? Perhaps some issues that these can have for potential buyers, or just your general thoughts either as an owner or just as a viewer who maybe likes the car or would like to talk about it. But overall, that's it for this particular review. Of course, stick around on the channel for more Beards and Cars, used buying guide and road test style reviews, and be sure to check out the ones which I've already done as well. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.